Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another DMC chat because this never gets old. This is Whitney here. If you have not already listened to our first DMC chat with Anna Tretter and Kate Sullivan, please scroll back a couple episodes and listen to that one first because we went on a whole lot of tangents and dove into a whole lot of things and ran out of time to really dive into two topics we're going to discuss today. First, if each of us were to launch our own DMC, if we were to build our own DMC, what characteristics we would include in that, and which is essentially a picture of, regardless of who we know and love to work with, what our idea of a perfect DMC is and the characteristics that they have. And secondly, what does an ideal DMC partnership look like, and how can we as travel advisors contribute to that ideal partnership? So, Kate and Anna, welcome back. Thank you so much again for more time to talk about DMCs.
Could do it all day.
Literally.
Excited to dig in. Exactly.
It's my favorite topic.
Okay, if we were to build our own DMC, what characteristics would it have and what would it look like? Kate, do you want to start, or does that feel like high pressure?
No, I'll start. I made a list. I was probably trying to avoid doing my taxes or something more businessy. Okay, so ideal DMC characteristics. Number one for me is that it's very relationship based and is not transactional on either side, where I don't feel like I'm placing an order and they don't feel like they're having an order placed, but it's a discussion and a dialogue and very communication heavy.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it looks and feels like in your inbox and in correspondence when it is more transactional?
I would say it's a little more frustrating and probably on both ends. Like, I think from my perspective, if it was something more transactional, it's where I kind of go into it with a sense of like, I think they should start here for 2 nights and then go here and then go here. And like, we'll do we'll start in Rome and we'll do a Colosseum tour and then we'll go to the Vatican. And then, in 3 days, we'll go up to Florence and then they'll go to the Uffizi and they'll do like a food tour, and then they'll go up to Venice and make some carnival masks and like run out of there. And I think there are times where I've done that, but it's typically where it's a lower budget and we don't have the room to be as creative. Mm-hmm. But that's a very unsatisfying situation for me personally because it doesn't feel very creative. Mm-hmm. And I think it's only really suitable for a client who has some more modest expectations and perhaps isn't very well traveled and it is really kind of just looking for those greatest hits. Mm-hmm. It isn't really looking to have anything kind of like extra or additional kind of sprinkled on top. But that's not what I got into this business to do, right? I don't want to just do greatest hits trips.
What you've described sounds like there's a correlation between a greatest hits trip and a transactional conversation with the DMC. So does it start with a client, or have you had a client that is not greatest hits? They want more creativity. You go into it wanting the conversation and the creativity. And then the response from the DMC is feeling transactional. 100%. So can you describe like what does their response look and feel like that you're like, whoa, wait, what?
I mean, I think I'm trying to think of a good example. So like I went to Spain a couple of years ago with my husband and I have lived in Spain, but I have traveled through it extensively. I know it pretty well. And I've reached out to a very well-known virtuoso DMC to help with the touring for it because, as we all know, my husband loves the DMC experience. And what I got back was really cookie cutter. And I had not been very prescriptive. I was kind of like, here are the cities we're going to be in, the amount of time that we have, like, kind of 1 or 2 things in each city. And the first thing that got back was just very kind of high level, like walking tour of Sevilla, like tapas,
like greatest hits kind of.
Yeah, like visit the Alhambra with a guide. And, and like my kind of like baseline for even talking to DMCs is like, if you work in Spain, I assume that you can hook me up with a guide at the Alhambra. Like I'm looking for more than that.
Right.
Like I'm looking for you to bring ideas to the table.
Yes.
And they did eventually come up with some cool stuff. and some things that like I've incorporated for clients since. But I really had to kind of go back a couple of times and push a little bit further to be like, this isn't a cost issue. Like, this is just more of a substitution thing. Like, I've already been to the Alhambra. Like, I'm happy to go out again. My husband hasn't been. Like, I'd like to do something that's new to me as well.
Yes.
And so it just took a little bit more back and forth and kind of pushing to get it to a point where I felt like, oh, this isn't stuff that like I could just read about in, you know, like a Rick Steves guide. Like, this isn't stuff like I wouldn't have thought to look for on my own.
Yeah. So what I'm kind of hearing, and to kind of, you know, deduce it down to a simple statement, is it's like there are DMCs that can execute everything that we need in terms of transfers and the hotel bookings, and a guide will be at your hotel to walk you around and show you the Alhambra or whatever. But there's a difference between a DMC like that, who's just providing seamless logistical components all put into a package, and there's a DMC who is coming at it with some creativity of wanting to go back and forth with you, learning about you. Oh, you've been, but your husband haven't been. You lived there. What are you really interested in? And then like, hey, here are some ideas. What do you think of that? Like, that's more of the communication that you're looking for.
Yeah. And the DMC that I use now in Spain is someone where we have that conversation all the time, and where we very frequently will have literal actual conversations, either just like over WhatsApp chatting, or we'll get on the phone together to kind of talk through who are these people and like what's going to be a good fit for them. And I really appreciate that approach. And it's really driven virtually all of my business for Spain. And now some in Portugal is starting to go in that direction, just because I do really appreciate the kind of care and thought that they put into not just building the itinerary, but that they've put into building experiences so that they have them to offer. So it's not just relationship based between me and the client, or me and the DMC, or the DMC and the client, but it's also the DMC and their community.
Yes.
And like the people who are actually offering the things, so that they have more to offer beyond like a licensed guide who can take you around the Alhambra. Like,
we're looking for DMCs, or you would create a DMC. This is weird. I need to make sure I don't get distracted from the initial question.
Yeah.
You would build a DMC in which you, as you know, the owner, whatever, is super, super connected and tied into the local community, because this is what's driving your creativity and these really incredible experiences you can provide.
Yeah.
That is a really good way to articulate it. It is so much more nuanced, I think, and helpful than, will they offer the ungoogleable?
Yeah. I mean, I think like if Anna and I were to start a DMC here in DC, like, I think we'd put our heads together and we'd be like, I'd be like, well, you know, I know this guy who like makes this artisanal ice cream.
Like,
and like, I have this friend who owns a boutique. And like, do you know someone in sports? Like, what, you know, who can we go out and talk to and try to like create some things that nobody else is offering to really like showcase this destination and make it so that people aren't just like
in the works.
Absolutely not.
in your free time.
I've had that artisanal ice cream with you. It's great.
Right? You know?
I think it's a really good point though. And it brings up like when we go on FAMs, or when we're maybe going to a destination, and that feeling where you're being greeted by the hotelier at the hotel, and maybe they're taking you out to their favorite dinner spot, or they're taking you for like a quick, let me show you around the neighborhood. And that feeling of like, I've got a community actually that's greeting me and opening up some doors. And it doesn't need to be the fanciest doors. I mean, but just to give that sense of like really personalized welcome to a destination that we often as advisors get to experience because we know people in the destination, but to be able to give that to your clients through the DMC's relationships is super cool.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. So in this DMC that you would create, sometimes a client wants the greatest hits. That could be their personal preference. That could be, I don't want to stereotype too much, but I generally find a correlation between the more you travel, the less of the greatest hits you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And so for you and the characteristic of the DMC that you're building, if somebody comes to you and you love this communication, you're super closely connected with your community, this is your like the creativity driving the trip designs, but someone is asking for the greatest hits. Do you accept that business and say, we're going to knock the greatest hits out of the park? Absolutely. Or do you say, actually, this isn't where we thrive. There are many other DMCs or companies who can execute this just as well. And
I mean, are we trying to make money? Because I think your bread and butter is the greatest hits. And then, like, for me, table stakes for DMC is that the execution is going to be flawless. The drivers are going to be great. The cars are going to be lovely. Like, the transitions are going to be seamless.
I think the question that I'm asking...
And that you can do the greatest hits. And then the other stuff is like the extra layer. That's what makes for great.
I think the real question I'm asking is, in my experience, these really, really communicative, entrenched in their community, creative DMCs are higher end and charge more, as they should. So if someone is only looking for greatest hits, it could probably be very well executed with a different partner that has a different price point.
I think that's a client question, to be honest. Like, who's the client? Mm-hmm. What are their expectations?
Sure. Sure. Okay. We got real into bullet point number 1.
Yeah.
What's the next one?
I'd break down in pricing.
Uh-huh. I know.
Thank you.
Okay. Talk to me about...
This is such a tough one. Yeah.
Okay. Talk to me about what you mean by breakdown, how you're using that information, and why you would include that in a DMC that in the characteristics of a perfect DMC.
I think it's so critical in being able to accurately evaluate a proposal and being able to gauge, like, have we really hit the mark for the client? Because clients, 9 times out of 10, they're some balance. There's somewhere in the spectrum of like hotel forward to experience forward, but like,
yep.
Those are the 2 things that they care about the most. They're at one end or the other. People are somewhere in the middle. Pricing matters to a luxury client. Pricing matters, but I'm not sure that it's very often the top characteristic that they care about with a trip. Like, it's definitely a thing they care about for them. But I think for most of my clients, and I think for yours, like, it's a little bit squishy. They're not usually like, we only have $20,000 to spend. We cannot go like a dollar over that. They come in with the range.
Well, this is the range we're comfortable with, but if you show something to me that I really want or that I really love, I will spend 50% more, but I need to know why, and that I want that to be my decision. And
yes.
100. Yes.
Yeah.
I just have this exact experience. I'll shout them out because they did such a great job with Original Senses in Greece. What I loved about them was I had clients who were going from, island to island, and they were debating, do we pay for the helicopter or not? Or do we do the ferry? And because of the way that Original Senses broke down the pricing, I could have a conversation with the client and say, you're going to spend, this many €1,000 on the helicopter transfer, or this is the exact cost of what it would do if you had a transfer by vehicle, then by ferry, then by another vehicle. Yep. Here's how long it would take. And it's just like a very clear
of the ferry.
Yes, right. And then the client is empowered to make the decision.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that word empowerment is so critical, because that's the main thing for clients who do have questions about pricing. I think a lot of times it comes down to not the actual number itself, but the feeling of like, you're just asking me to spend $50,000 on something and I don't know where the money's going.
Right.
And so I think I very rarely want the numbers to actually give them to the clients myself. I want it as information for myself so that I can be better educated and help set their expectations about what they're going to get, why something costs what it does. But I'm really going to be like, I think that the ferry helicopter example is a really good one, because like they are 2 very different costs, and they're like hard costs that you are ascertainable. Like, you can go and figure out what those costs are for the most part. And there's such radically different experiences, and the costs are so radically different that to be like, well, sure, you could spend $300 and have a ferry, but you're literally like running onto the ferry, throwing your bag in a pile with a bunch of other people's, and then like trying to get up the stairs before the boat starts moving, you fall over. Versus like, you can take a helicopter and like the whole thing is just very seamless.
And I think that the breakdown, like, I'll just say, I've never had anyone helicopter island to island in Greece before. And so I don't even know what that cost is. And so in my mind, it's like, well, is it 10K or 40K? Because if it's 10K, I have some clients who probably would have preferred that. But if it's 40K, I don't think those are my clients right now. And so sometimes the breakdown is even just that information of me kind of knowing in the back of my mind, would these clients appreciate knowing about this option? Or is it so far beyond what they would ever spend that it should
it's just not
be a part of it's not an option.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the breakdown enables me to do that. To kind of like,
without that knowledge,
it empowers me to lead the conversation a little bit more. When you want a breakdown or when you have a breakdown, is this something that you're mostly using for yourself? Or are you sharing it just like forwarding it onto the client?
Never forwarding onto the client.
Never.
I would say the only reason that a client would know the actual cost of the services is if it's a situation where for some reason it's like city-based, we've booked the hotel directly, and now we're booking the services a la carte. Like in that circumstance, they know how much things cost.
Sure.
In any circumstance that's what I would call more of like a pure DMC situation, I don't know of an instance where I've shared the actual cost with a client, even when I have it.
Mm-hmm.
It's more just information that helps me do my job.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Information that helps. I also feel that it helps me partner more closely with the DMCs, because I think what we always say is that we know the client, they know the destination. So if they know the destination and they're sending a proposal that doesn't have a breakdown, they're also acting as if they know the client.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
But they do not. And maybe we've provided a detailed brief of the client, but there's so much nuance in a client relationship, especially with clients who we've worked with many times and who we've sent to many different destinations, that DMC not offering a breakdown and essentially making all of the decisions and then sending it to us with one full package and then expecting that we send it on to the client with one full package with no like dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Feels presumptuous.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Is that the right word? Like, if I agree with your characteristic of a perfect DMC. Like, if we're going to be true partners and if you truly focus on the destination and we truly focus on the client, then we both have to have all the information to make the best decision for that match.
Yeah, and maybe pricing breakdown is the wrong term to use. Maybe more transparency around pricing or more visibility into cost levers is a better way to put it. Like, I don't necessarily need to know that like a transfer costs 190 euros or it costs 230 euros, like whatever.
Yeah.
That's an academic distinction at the end of the day. But what I do need to know is like, if you're staying in Milan and you're going to do a full day tour to Lake Como and it includes like time on the water, whatever, and it's 2,500 euros, that's fine. I just need to know like where that chunk of money is so that when the client sees an overall budget of 25 and they're like, could we get it down to 23? I can say to them, we can do that, but you're going to have to remove this experience that I think you're really going to love, or we're going to have to do this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think you said the cost levers of like in this itinerary, we've got, 25 over here and 1,500 over here and 500 here. There's like those levers of trying to understand like where all this money is going. Because I mean, there are times when I simply am shopping online and I'm like, that's $40, that's $60, that's $50. I want all of this. And then I see the total and I'm like, where did that come from? Right? Like this happens to humans.
So you haven't made that decision yourself.
This happens to humans all the time that we want everything that we said that we wanted, but then we still feel this sticker shock. And then I have the information to kind of look through and be like, oh yeah, I still want
all those things. Yeah.
That number just felt bigger than, you know what I mean? Like this is a human nature type of thing. I think in addition to understanding the levers of an itinerary of like how is the cost being allocated and where it's going, it's also helpful information to sometimes understand what goes into things.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes in a proposal, we see a title of an experience and a very brief description. And while it sounds great, like it sounds good enough that we want to include it, we don't actually fully understand what's happening behind the scenes to execute that, which then makes it really hard for us to understand well, that's why it costs 2,000 euros and it actually should cost 2,000 euros. That's really helpful context.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did a private dining experience in Iceland last year on a fam, and it was like they drove us to this like park in the middle of nowhere, and they had a chef waiting for us, and he had made this like beautiful gourmet meal, and like it was keyed to like my dietary restrictions and someone else's dietary restrictions, and they had like fires going and like furs for us to put our feet on, and it was just this like really beautiful experience. And so we asked the DMC when it was over on the way back, we were like, just out of curiosity, if we were going to add that to an experience, to an itinerary for a couple, like how much would it cost? And she was like, I don't know, it's not like crazy. It's like maybe 2,500, 3,000 euros.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, like that feels commensurate to like the totality of that experience. And then she explained
Agreed.
It's because we have to have like 4 people go out in the morning and like get the site set up. And then they kind of like hang out while you're eating, and then they have to break it down and take it back to Reykjavik.
Yeah.
So there's just a certain amount of like manpower hours involved.
And
I was like,
you wouldn't necessarily
so
tell the client all that because sometimes you don't want to know how the sausage is made, but it's so helpful for us to know like, oh man, the DMC is really rocking it. Like this is everything they're doing to pull this off. And then now you also know you had the experience, you know the general cost. And so you can decide together with the DMC with which clients that's a good fit in both experience and cost.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you have 2 different kinds of clients too, right? Like you have people who like do not want to know what things cost. They're like, just tell me the total number. I don't want to be thinking about whether I feel like this thing is objectively worth whatever it costs. And then you have people who are just naturally a little bit more curious either about how the sausage is made, or they are more cost sensitive, or they're just curious about how much things cost, or maybe they have a higher degree of sensitivity to like whether something feels worth it to them or not.
Yes.
Not to go off on a total tangent, but I'm renovating my apartment right now, and we are switching out the light plate switches to be brass so that they'll match the new sort of setup of the apartment. I need to know how much that costs because I'm that kind of person. Will I ever tell my husband how much those cost? Absolutely not.
Right.
He doesn't need to know. He's comfortable with the total overall cost.
Yep.
Like he wouldn't be like, that's absurd, we're not doing it. But he also just like doesn't have any curiosity about what that number is.
Well, and I think that the cost is the cost of the thing. And you have decided that it is important enough to invest in that detail. And then I'm sure there are other people who would renovate their home and be like, we're keeping the same light switches. I don't care that they don't match. That is not of value to me. And it's not that the cost of the light switch plate is good or bad or high or low, or it is what it is.
Right.
But everyone is going to make a different decision about that cost. And I think that that's what the breakdowns empower us to do is the cost of the boat is the cost of the boat. I don't care if one DMC.
There's no value attached to it. Like there's no good, bad, like
nope. I don't care.
Inexpensive, like things cost what they cost. That is what it is.
Yep. I know that if I quote directly with one boat company, they're going to tell me it's about 1,500 euros. I know that DMC is going to tell me it's about 2,500 euros. I don't care what's happening in that 1,000 euro difference. I trust that the DMC is doing what they need to do. And it probably is an elevated experience than what I'm providing when I try to book it direct with this other boat company. So I don't care. What I do care about is this client going to feel that this is a good value and a great addition to their trip for this cost?
Yeah.
And the answer depends on the client. But a breakdown enables the breakdown enables me. It's either the client wants the experience, but they don't want to pay for it. The client wants the experience and they're willing to pay for it. Or that's too high. This isn't even an option that I can present to them.
Yeah. But without that information, it's impossible for you to make that determination or even to think about like, should I approach the client with this information?
Exactly.
Right.
If a client comes to me on a budget or even a remote like limitation on the Amalfi Coast or in Greece, I do not mention a private boat. I do not even mention that it's an option.
Right.
You know? Okay. So we could go down a deep, deep, deep rabbit hole with breakdowns, but I feel like this is helpful. This is good. What's your next bullet point?
Sorry. I feel like this is also controversial. I want a catalog of experiences.
Me too.
I want a list of the unique things that you have to offer. You can include the greatest hits things, whatever, just for completeness. But what I really want to know are, what are the things that I wouldn't think of as like a relatively well-educated person who's reasonably well-versed in this destination?
Yeah.
Like as a person who has lived in Spain and has traveled to Andalusia multiple times, I didn't know that there's a cool archaeological site just outside of Cordoba, which is like in excavation at the moment. There's a cool like 3D vision thing so you can like use your phone to see what it used to look like.
Wow.
You know, like what having a guide kind of walk us through that and help us envision like, why does that site exist? What was it used for? Who lived there? You know, what's the story of how they rediscovered it? Like what's going on with the excavation? Like that's a super cool experience. You know, I need someone to just tell me that that exists.
How did you learn about this?
By pushing the sort of more classic DMC for options that were a little more out of the box. And I completely understand why some DMCs have the approach where they're just like, here's the stuff people want to know about. And I feel like it's always tangent, a little bit fuzzy when you're an advisor going in and they know that you're an advisor. Cause I feel like a lot of times DMCs are like, well, this is what you're going to sell. You should see and experience this. And I'm like, I don't really know that I need to go to the Coliseum with a guide in order to be able to sell clients on doing that. It might be helpful. I'm not sure that's like the greatest use of my time. If there's something really unusual that I could do so that I can sell them on like a richer way to experience that destination.
Yeah.
And so what I want are the more unusual, unique things that you've developed because it's someone that you know personally and you know they do this really cool thing.
And we couldn't possibly ask you for it because we don't know.
I don't know it exists.
We don't know it exists. And back to the point of if you're the expert in the destination and I'm the expert in the client, if you hold all that too close to your chest so that we can't ask for it, then we just trust that we give you a profile and that you magically suggest it. Whereas if we had a peek into your experiences that were available, maybe we could pull something out and say, tell me more about this because I didn't share with you because I know so much information in my head about this client that they're interested in XYZ and I think they might be interested in this. Like,
yeah. And it's like, I try to provide them with a, de facto sort of catalog of the client. Like, here's all the things that I know about these people. Here's like the trips they've gone on in the past. Here's all the feedback we've gotten. Like, I have one client who gives us like pages of feedback and it's amazing because it's really granular. And I know like why she liked a specific guide and driver versus why she didn't love a different experience. Like I'm providing you with all of this information and yet still you never know what's going to spark like, oh, that's really interesting. I think they might be into that. Tell me more about that so that I can take that to them and ask them if that's something they want to incorporate.
Well, and there's just so much nuance that even if you are providing super, super detailed profiles of your clients, there's so much nuance and like reading between the lines that we do in conversation with clients that it's really hard to put on paper.
Or even just think, as well as you know yourself, like I love shopping. Am I ever going to want to go to a shopping tour with another human? No, 100% no. But because the discovery aspect of it is what's really important to me. It's not the like going and spending money aspect.
Oh, see, that's what I want. I want someone to take me to the best shops that like fit my style and my budget and what I'm looking for so that I can get in and buy cool stuff and move on with my day.
And I would never trust another human to be able to interpret that about me. And it would remove part of...
If we had a catalog of shopping experiences, we could maybe find something that fit both of us. Like you do this, exactly. I'll do this, and I'll meet you for happy hour.
Bingo.
And I want to pull you into this. so far, Kate has mentioned that the characteristic of her perfect DMC would be super communicative, like a back and forth dialogue, very upfront and very closely tied to her community, that would absolutely provide a breakdown to empower us to make decisions and kind of be a part of the conversation more, and to provide a catalog of experiences, most especially related to the things of like, what are things that you can do and execute that we would never think to ask for. Do you agree wholeheartedly with all of these? Do you have some nuance or context that you might express a little bit differently?
I'm very much on the same page with Kate. I think this idea sort of ties together a lot of the different topics, which is like, what are the DMCs actually doing on the ground to pull together these relationships? Why or why not are they doing price breakdowns? But I think obviously DMCs are marking up the experiences. I want to know, like, what is the service component, not just the experience of it, but we talk about like part of the reason why we're working with the DMC is so that we can ensure our clients have a great on the ground experience. What does that actually look like? Is that like, some of them, if you have an emergency, you can call this phone number between business hours. Some of them, we're constantly checking up with you on WhatsApp. The advisors is, pulled into the message so that everyone's on the same page about what's happening. And it's like a real white glove level of service that happens during the trip. If a DMC is thinking really creatively about how they're elevating a client's in-destination experience through different service touch points like that, and that's part of why their costs are higher because there are additional labor components, then like, talk to us as advisors about how that's different for your clients. In the same way that like, maybe they're feeling nervous in sharing prices because it's a competitive landscape. It's also competitive for travel advisors with other travel advisors. If we're being honest, there's a lot of us. And so we have to articulate to our clients how we're different from the next person, and whether that's our destination expertise or our relationships or the level of service that's happening throughout the trip planning process. That's part of our job to communicate that to our clients. And I really feel that a good DMC would communicate to advisors the level of service and experience that they're providing as part of like their business offerings too.
That is really helpful context to always have as well, just to kind of understand. I think along the lines of understanding their service and having a breakdown and understanding the cost of different experiences, I would add to all of this, like even a preemptive upfront. In general, when you work with us, these are the ranges that are good fits for us.
Mm-hmm.
I always ask DMCs for this. This is a question that I ask during like a meeting at a trade show. I ask DMCs to share this information with us when they complete their profile on the Hive. And it all goes back to me trying to understand, like, I have a client and I know what their comfort level is for investment. And I want to know if that comfort level is your baseline, your bare minimum, if it's middle ground for you, if it's high end for you. I want to know that before I reach out to you. Because if I don't know that and then I reach out and then I find like, oh, you're not going to plan anything for 10 days under 40K, I should have never emailed you in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to waste your time either.
I don't want to waste my time, the client's time, anyone's time. And so there's along with the question of like how you work, what your services on the ground look like. If you're a little bit more expensive than others, we don't really care if you're high end or medium end or low end, or we don't care. We just want to know what you do and what you do best and what that looks like in cost, average cost, so that we can try to decide, is this a good fit for the cost that the client is looking to spend? So I would just add to that.
Yeah, I think
those
that's
were
really
bullet points 8,
reasonable.
9, and 10 on my list.
I'm sorry. Okay, let's get back
No,
to.
I'm kidding.
Bullet point 4.
I mean, I'm
Kate's
not.
10
Those
commandments.
literally are 8, 9, and 10.
That's perfect.
No, I think that because you have to think about it as, so there's the experience between you and the DMC during the planning process, particularly that initial stage. And then the experience between you, the DMC, and the client once the proposal has been proposed until payment is made. There's a little bit of a soupy, murky interaction there. Mm-hmm. And then there's the interaction primarily between the client and the DMC while they're traveling that you ideally have some visibility into. And like, I feel like there are three really distinct stages. And so the feel of them can be really different based on the DMC. And like, for some of them, that the client interaction piece between the DMC and the client while they're traveling is amazing. And like, I think that's what we're all going for, is an experience where like that feels great for the client and you feel comfortable that like things are being handled.
Yes.
Right.
Like that is of paramount importance, but like just below that is how does it feel while you're actually setting the trip up?
Yep. We worked really hard on asking these specific questions on the Hive of like separating a DMC is not good or bad. A DMC has the communicative phase up front. They have the confirmation phase of what is it like to pay you? Like Kate's go-to phrase is always like, don't make it hard for me to give you money. And I wish that we never had to say that, but there are so many people who make it really hard for us to give them money. And then like, what is the confirmation stage and what does the final itinerary look like? And do we come through it and find like 65 mistakes? And then that causes a whole bunch, like what's that experience of the DMC? And then what's the actual experience on the ground? And I've had a lot of experiences where on the ground was flawless. Thank God. But my experience behind the scenes with the DMC was a shit show.
Yeah, and it really erodes your confidence that the client experience is going to be good. Like, unless you've used them before and you're like, well, this is going to be a struggle to get it off the ground. But once the clients are there, I feel great about it. That first or second time around, you're just like, I really hope this is going to work out.
And ideally, you don't have any of those puzzle pieces that are hard, because even if I don't want to cross my fingers for any trip.
No.
And I've also had the reverse where up front, the communication seemed really, really great. But then on the ground, they were dropping the ball. It's just like, guys, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And that's really crappy too.
Yeah. And I think it's, this is a sidebar for advisors. Like, I think it's a good analogy to how we make our clients feel too. Like,
yes.
Are you making them feel during the planning process confident and like things are going to be handled and you know what you're talking about and your partners that have their shit together?
And then what is it like to book a trip with us, to like give us your passports, give us your credit card, get the updated itinerary? Like, what's that like?
Yeah. Do you feel like you have information when you need it? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And then what's it like to actually be traveling and have a response from us? That's all. Yeah. It's a very good point.
So my next bullet point is another just transparency piece. Like, can we book hotels directly and book the experiences and the touring? Can we do transportation and touring separate from the hotels, basically?
Okay. So if you are building your perfect DMC, are you going to do experiences and hotels or just one or the other?
I think I would understand why sometimes hotels need to be booked directly. Permit that to happen while still servicing the touring and transportation. And I would just ensure that my pricing model supports that.
So one thing I was just thinking about the cost breakdown and talking to DMCs about their services, I think sometimes things feel wishy-washy because there's so many different hotels that could be chosen. And so that's why they're like, well, do you want a castle or do you want a 4-star B&B? How could I possibly give you a range of what my services cost? And it's like, actually, I can quote the hotels myself.
Right. I know what the hotels cost. The client knows what the hotels cost. Like, this is no secret to anybody.
What I actually want is like a ballpark, like per day services just for your DMC services alone, not for the hotel. So if you say, per day, if you've got a driver and some sort of experience, like every single day, I don't know what it is, like you should plan on $1,500 a day plus hotel. Thank you.
Perfect.
Oh my gosh. That's all I need. So now I know that, is this a 4-star client hotel? We need $2,000 a day. Is this a castle type of client hotel? We need $3,000 per day. That's all I need.
Yeah. I think there we go. We just solved it.
I think we just solved it. Okay.
Or whatever reason, like in your destination, that isn't feasible, because I do think it varies country to country. Like there's some countries where just obviously the hotel like I would love more visibility on this, but like there appear to be countries where the negotiation process with the hotels and the contracting just isn't favorable to DMCs. So, I mean, France, this must be the case because so many French DMCs are like, I don't care, book your own hotel. Like, I'd rather not book your hotels.
I find that in the UK a little bit too, that some DMCs are like, let us know when you book your hotels and then we can chat.
Yeah, where they're just getting bar and maybe minus 20%. So there's a margin for them and a margin for us.
So that's the transparency component as well. Like sometimes when it comes to a breakdown, what I really need to know is less about the breakdown and more about, do you have contracted rates with these hotels? Or have you added a commission on top of the bar rate and I don't know about it?
Yes, exactly. And if you have, why are the terms and conditions the way that they are?
And why didn't you flag it? You know, I can book it direct and get a better cost for the client. Why aren't we advocating for the client? I actually prefer when I just had my favorite Italy DMC, Italy with Class. I went to them and I said, these are the hotels the clients have got their eye on and this is what they want to book. The DMC came back and said, these two we absolutely love. We work closely with. We have contracted rates. That's great. These two, it will be better for the client if you book direct. Are you okay with that? Or else, here are others in those cities that we work closely with and we recommend. I am going to kiss them when I arrive at Duco.
That's perfect.
Thank you for just straight up. And then I said, oh, I would love to know this list that you work closely with in the future next time, so that
I can drive towards that.
I can drive toward that, because I never knew your contracted hotel list. And so I'm just shooting from the hip over here, showing them what I like.
Right.
So again, transparency. Just talk to us, guys. Just chat with us.
Yeah, it feels very palatable to know that clients are going to pay a markup on transportation and experiences. It feels less palatable that they'd be paying a markup, if there's not a contracted rate, compared to what we could book for them directly online. I mean, that's just like, I don't see what a DMC is doing to add value to that booking.
Agreed.
And as a client, I would find that unacceptable. Like as a client, I would find, like, of course, like there's a markup on the driver, there's a markup on the experience, whatever, like that is what it is. But like, it's so simple to book a hotel directly that I think very few clients would be like, sure, that should actually cost 20% higher than it would if I just booked it myself online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so your perfect characteristic is a DMC that will book both, that has contracts with hotels, but that is also happy to let that go if you want to book direct.
Yeah, and it's just understanding about the fact that, like, if we have preferred partner relationships, like, we really have to book those directly. Like, it's detrimental to the overall agency, and it's bad for everybody except the DMC if we book that through the DMC.
Yeah,
How would that
agree
work
with that.
for you? How would that work for you if you were, let's say you're planning a destination that you don't already have like your favorite hotels there. So you are relying on the DMC to give you some idea as far as like routing for the trip. But
if they bring me the hotel, then I'll book it through them. Usually if I know that I have like a Four Seasons client and there's a chance that we'll be using a Four Seasons hotel, then I'll discuss that with them up front and let them know that. And say, like, if you have an alternative to suggest, like, I'm looking at Mallorca for somebody right now, and I was like, these are real Four Seasons clients. They know there's a Four Seasons in Mallorca. If there's a use case to not put them there and to put them somewhere else instead, like, let's have that conversation so I can have that conversation with the client. And back to the conversation we had was, that's pretty far out on a peninsula by itself. We think they should be over in this region. Here are the hotels we'd suggest for that.
Yeah. What I hear you saying is that if the DMC comes to you with hotel suggestions that are a good fit, you book it with them, even if you could book it at a preferred partner rate.
I will try to have the conversation about the preferred partner situation before they propose anything and say, these are the preferred partnerships that are really important to me, and it would be important to me to be able to book this directly. If you genuinely think that something that falls within that portfolio is the right solution, then like, let's talk about it.
I don't find
appreciate being able
myself
to
in
book
this situation very often because I do so much high level hotel research before I reach out to the DMC because I'm always just trying to get a gauge of like what's there, what's available, what's the price. So if I ever go to a DMC and I'm truly asking for hotels, I'm generally like, I don't have any preferred partners here that I feel good about, or they're not available, or they're pricing too high. Like, what are options that you can recommend? So I'm usually leaning on them to recommend something that I wouldn't otherwise know about. Then they get the booking no matter what, in my mind.
Yeah.
Because without them, I wouldn't have known it. I wouldn't have known about that option.
Yeah, if you're tapping into their expertise.
Yeah. And I think in general, having that brand discussion is important about hotels when you reach out to a DMC. Like, I also have a lot of people who are consultants and they have a lot of points. It's like dangling candy in front of a baby to give them like one night at a Marriott when they, as like a transportation stop, like 100% of the time, they're going to ask if they can book that on points.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll be like, let's just not propose the Marriott there. Is there a boutique option?
Yeah.
Or just make them aware, like, we may have to carve this out. If that's really
the only option, or Okay. Do you agree, Anna, or do you have different thoughts about experiences versus hotels versus what we can book separately together?
Yeah, I'm very pro pulling hotels out. I just don't really see what value a DMC is adding versus if I book it. And I'm always like communicating with the hotel in advance because I have the full client profile with their specific requests. And especially if it's families, it's like I almost don't want a middle person because if there's a very specific request, like a certain type of crib setup or a sound machine, like I do not want that to get lost in translation. If a mom is not bringing her crib because she's relying on the hotel to make sure it's set up, then I don't want there to be 4 people on, between me and the person executing it.
In that situation, I connect with every hotel directly, even when it is booked through DMC.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
I will reach out and say, my name is Whitney. This is the booking. It was booked through my preferred partner, Original Senses or Italy with Class. Here's some information about the client that I'd like to share. So I do that. I don't know if any DMC would feel, there's a couple DMCs who really want you to send the notes through them because their process has been built that way. I find that is rare. Most DMCs don't mind or haven't had any concern that I reach out to hotels directly.
The value out of a DMC with the hotel just is a leverage question. Like if there's an issue, they're driving so much more volume through that hotel than I ever could be individually, that I do think it can be really helpful to have them in the mix, unless it's a situation where you have like a BDM or like a, national or global contact that you can reach out to help you solve that problem.
I will also book preferred partner. I know, Kate, you probably don't agree with this, but I will book preferred partner hotels or any hotel through a DMC when I feel that the client is going to prefer just a one all-in package. I don't need to see the breakdown. I don't need a messy invoice. I don't want part of it paid now and part of it paid during my trip. I just want, what is my trip cost? And so when I know that I have a client who they just really prefer the deposit and the final payment and they get there and everything's paid, I will let the DMC make the bookings at preferred partner hotels for that seamlessness in the payment stuff.
Mm-hmm. I understand that. I would probably push back on it, but I don't have a lot of clients who.
I am someone who doesn't want to know what things cost. I enjoy a hotel or an experience far more when it's paid for and it's done and I don't have to think about it anymore than when I'm enjoying this beautiful experience and then I'm snapped out of reality with a fat bill before I get into my private transfer to the next place. For me personally, that snaps me out of the magic of the trip that I'm on.
I would probably see if we could prepay it in that circumstance.
Interesting.
Because I understand what you mean. I just checked out of Adair Manor a couple weeks ago and it was like, oh shit, we had a lot at the bar. Okay. I didn't need to see
the bar bill is always going to be the bar bill.
I didn't need to see the bill at all, but yeah.
Okay, what's next on your list?
Provide detail on the touring and the proposal. how long does it last? Where are they going to be picked up? Are they going to be dropped off at the same spot? What exactly does the experience entail? Solely because I have clients who are really into granular details and they will ask the questions, and it's just like, you already know this information.
Yes.
Like, just tell me up front.
I love DMCs with some like full day touring experiences where they'll give like a high level, like, this is a rough outline of what to expect on this day. Like, we're going to start with a
90-minute that you'll exactly go from like here to here to here to here. Like,
right.
Things happen. But
like, if you don't know that a tour involves a 2-hour drive on the front end and a 2-hour drive on the back end, and that's why it's an 8-hour day, like that is a real quick way to piss everybody off.
Yeah. And like, what are they going to do for lunch? Yep. Like, we spend so much time on dining. Like,
yep.
You know where you're dropping them off so that I can book a reservation for lunch that's not going to be a 45-minute walk away.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so just more detail in general.
For sure.
And then use a platform that we can collaborate on.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So much extra information to every itinerary, from know before you go guides that just give you kind of like facts you need to know about your destination, to here's what to do.
Dining reservations. Spa reservations. Guides. What to do in your free time.
Yeah.
Here's my favorite ice cream. Like, so much. much. How to withdraw money from an ATM in a foreign country. Just so many things.
Yeah. So many things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and I know like there's so much platform diversification now that it's a little bit challenging. I don't want to have an Access account and a Travelify account and a Turn account. And like, I understand that suppliers don't. And like, there are times for sure, like with Safari, we'll just straight up send you the Safari operators what to, because that platform is just superior to anything that we can offer.
If you're literally doing nothing else, okay, but even their flights aren't in there.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, you know, often we'll have to just embed that information inside of Travelify. You know, I have clients I've been working with for 7 years. Like, they have all their trips in Travelify and they like having everything in one place.
Yep.
So I'm not going to pop them over to Access for one specific circumstance. There actually is a really good tour operator that I like working with that I'm probably not going to work with again because they use Vamoose. And like, it is a really sophisticated platform and it has a lot of functionality that Travelify doesn't have. I don't think all of it is necessary or super valuable to the clients. And I think being able to have that one trip and that one-off platform is like, the fact that it's not cohesive with how they understand itineraries to work outbalances the fact that you've got like a weather forecast or like whatever else is embedded in that.
Interesting. I've never seen a Vamoose itinerary.
They're beautiful, but it costs like $300 a month. Like,
oh, wow.
It's a tour operator platform. It's not really designed for travel.
Okay,
advisors.
So if you were building a DMC, what would you do here?
I would probably have a platform that I would have be my main platform, or I would be comfortable working in, I mean, Turn's complicating things a little bit because I think until now, most people have been using either Travelify or Access. I'm going to ignore UMapped for the moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, the ideal situation is someone who sends me a Word document with everything in it that I can like upload into whatever platform I'm using. I need photos.
So if I were building a DMC, I would not use any technology whatsoever, assuming that the travel professionals I'm working with are using some form of technology. I would send a Word document with the descriptions, and for every tour that I've included, a link to a Dropbox to here's 10 high quality photos, use the ones you want.
Yeah.
More.
I don't know that there's a perfect solution for that, because I will say the suppliers that use, right now we're Travelify in this house. And the suppliers that use Travelify and where I can set up the shell, send it to them with the inquiry, and say, here's the new inquiry, like, here's what we know about them, like, do your thing. And then they build it right within it's hosted within my Travelify. Like, it's a way faster process and it sells much faster too.
But I've found so few and far between suppliers that use Travelify. Most use Access, and I won't touch Access.
The same. Yeah.
So that's kind of like, I love this idea of collaboration, but I think it's happened once that a supplier and I have collaborated on an itinerary in Travefy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think 2 kind of ride or die DMCs that use Travefy. And so
it works
those
well
situations are really easy to work with. And we sell more of them than we do other DMCs because it's so much faster.
Yeah. That's almost
honestly,
like having a team member.
Yeah. It's like we all are literally on the same team.
Yeah. That's incredible.
So I think ultimately, I think it's a problem that technology will solve. We'll, destroy the planet by doing it, but AI will probably solve the problem.
Well, the other option that if we only have the options that we currently have today, and if I were building a DMC, then like you have specific hotels that you work with and experiences that you plan. And while it would be heavy upfront to build a library in both Access and Travefy, if I were a DMC only selling one destination, I would do that. I would just have both and communicate with the advisor from square one and say, we have both of these, or the alternative is a Google Doc, but we prefer Access or Travefy. Which do you want? We'll start it there. And I would do both.
Yeah. I mean, because the Google Doc actually is a limitation. I worked with somebody this fall who used Google Docs as their delivery system and expected me to give that to the client. And so then when a change occurred, it occurred in the Google Doc. And absent them being really on top of notifying me so that I could update it within Travefy, then there's a problem.
So I think that DMC should never be allowed to update something in a proposal link or an itinerary link and not mention it by email.
Agreed.
100%.
Like, or text.
We cannot expect that that's the final deliverable being shared with the client.
I asked for a final deliverable in a PDF so that it can't be changed. I'm going off of this. And if there's a change, I need a new PDF. Or I need it in a link, but I need an email that it changed and tell me specifically what changed.
Right.
Yeah. The client had a good experience, but it makes me question using them again, to be honest. And it's a destination with a lot of alternatives. So
all very good. Anna, any additional thoughts on this?
We've covered so much ground. I'm very impressed by Kate's list.
I'm trying to, you have more bullet points.
I'm on bullet point 8, which is 24/7 support, which I feel like we already talked about.
Yeah.
9 is a group WhatsApp chat, and 10 is text the clients the night before with details for the next day.
I love that. I'm trying to think if
I've personally traveled with a DMC who does that, and it feels so good to be like, oh, they're going to tell me what to expect tomorrow. Amazing. I don't have to think about it.
Yeah. That we already put it in their Travefy so that they know in advance, but then in the moment, it's like, see you tomorrow. And it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. I've even had guides like test me and be like, I'm here. Like, I'm early. You take your time, but like when you're ready, I'm here.
Yes. Love it.
I love that so much.
Treat me like a person.
Yes. Oh, I love that. We briefly mentioned payments, but I think that's the other thing is that you need a super seamless, simple payment system.
Easy. Yeah.
Make it easy. Like, what's complicated? Not having an online payment link, only accepting wires.
Only accepting wires. Don't make me fill out a form and like print it and scan it and fax it back to you.
Never.
That hasn't happened in a while, but
yeah, I agree.
Make it clear to me if I need to issue you an invoice.
Oh my
after
God.
travel in order to be paid commission. Like,
yes.
Don't expect that I'm just going to know that about your country's banking laws.
Right.
Like, I understand why it happens.
Right.
I'm not always going to remember to do that. So I do appreciate when I get like an email afterwards. It's like, hey, we'd like to pay your commission.
You need to send us.
Here's specifically what we need from you, and it needs to contain this information.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
But yeah, an online payment system that, in theory doesn't require 2-factor authentication that goes to the client's phone.
Agreed.
Or if that's going to happen, like tell me that up front that like that's likely to occur so I can just forward the link to the client. Like understand that our typical process is for me to go to the client, get authorization to pay, obtain their credit card information, and put the payment through on their behalf.
Yes.
Like I have papered you and I in my contract to authorize myself to do that. Like there's no chargeback. There's no elevated chargeback risk for that. But if your banking system in your country is going to up a flag, I need to know that in advance so I can set the client's expectations. So it's not like, but I already paid for that. And it's like, well, no, you authorized me to make the payment for you. And I tried to make the payment, but it didn't go through. And so like, here's the link. Can you like find the time to pay it yourself today? And let me know when you did so I can check with them. And,
all of that is just nonsense. And all of this is like, it could be eased by communication. But I would say to bring this back to the advisors, we can ask all these questions up front.
Yeah.
And I do. Like, this is a part of like what I do when I'm really working with someone brand new is like, give me the rundown of like how this is going to work. I think the only thing I'll quickly add to the very early process in the trip design, not only like just to enhance like the communication, I really love when I go to a DMC and I say like, here's my client, here's what we're working with. Like, here's a few ideas I have, but like, I want to know your thoughts. Like, again, you're the expert in the destination. And we have that really awesome, creative, collaborative feat, like back and forth for a few emails of like, well, we could do this, this, and this, and we can add a night over here. We can do a day trip from there. Do you think the clients would be interested in that? Like, oh yeah, tell me more. Like, oh, like that's amazing. And then, okay, the budget is this. Do you feel comfortable with that? It's a little bit low. I think we need to increase it. Okay, I think we're good there, or we're not, right? Like having that like high level conversation up front there, so that in an email, we've got an outline before they ever go start quoting or putting together a beautiful proposal.
Yep.
That combined with, here's what you asked for, and I'm on budget because we're on the same page here. You asked for 20, I'm giving you 20. When I ask for 20 and you come back at 35, I cannot, like the temperature of my blood spikes so fast. It's not good. So if I ask for 20 and you agree to 20, come back at 20, and then give me upgrade options. Tell me where we can make this even more beautiful. If I say the range is 20 to 30 and you come in at 32 and I've got nothing, but if you come in and be like, here's 25 and here's how we can get to 40, that I can sell that all day long. So it's twofold. It drives me bonkers when I'll go to a DMC, they won't answer any of my high level questions and they'll just come back with a proposal. And I'm just like, what just happened here? That's very transactional.
Like I actually didn't ask you for that too.
I asked, like, yes. Yeah. I wanted like, dialogue.
I understand perhaps you can't arrive at that number without creating a proposal in your system. Like that's literally how the number is created. That's fine. But I don't actually want to see that proposal until we've agreed that this is a number that's going to work for everybody.
I want to chat with you like a human. I'm often asking questions like, hey, here are my thoughts, but like, what are your thoughts? And then they just like send a proposal based on my thoughts. And I'm like, I've never been to this place before.
Right. I asked you a question and it wasn't this.
So that, and always give what the clients asked for and tell us more. How can we even continue to elevate this with a room category upgrade or an experience upgrade or add a guide here and add a helicopter there? That if I would describe the perfect DMC, I've got in mind the DMCs that I work closely with who do that. And I sell I drive clients toward their destinations because I want to work with them more. Because it's easy, but it's also enjoyable. And it feels like creative. Yeah. And it's like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. They give me those vibes.
Yeah. I just thought of another bullet point.
Oh my gosh, tell me.
Give me some free stuff. Like, give me some restaurant recommendations. Give me some ideas for what to do in your free time. Like,
yes.
Give me the secret sauce. Like, where should they go shopping? Like, you're not going to make money on it. I'm not going to make money on it. But everybody knows that's what people like to do when they travel. They don't just want to be herded around by a driver and a guide the whole time. They want to go explore. Like, when you're staying in a dare, where do you go eat in the village? You don't want to eat at the fucking Michelin star restaurant the whole time. Like,
and in Dublin, go to a pub. What are the local boutiques we need to check out? Don't make me Google that shit because I'm not going to get good results. Only Kate knows how to search shopping options and actually uncover the real choices. I still cannot figure out how she does it because I've tried everything. I've even asked Claude, like, you're Kate Sullivan. You love to shop in Paris. Where should I go? Claude doesn't know either. I have not had, but if you ask Curated Greece and Sita, she'd be like, here's the 5 boutiques you should go to because that's where she shops.
She'd be like, just go to Parikio and Paros, just walk around. I can't tell you the names of the exact shops, but like it's going to be this.
Yeah, like here's
street,
the neighborhood.
street.
Here's
like,
the street. Yeah. That's actually very helpful. It doesn't have to be like, here's the name and the hours that they're open. I don't need that.
Yeah.
It needs to be
but
like,
it's like, don't waste your time going over here. Go over here.
Hang out there.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this is so great. If any DMCs
Does
are
that
listening,
feel like a huge lift for a DMC?
I don't think so, but not everybody does
for the most part. Maybe
I agree.
I mean, I would say like there are some really elevated DMCs that do that, and they just give it to you.
Yeah,
and it's such a it's such a huge value add when that comes up with the proposal or with the final itinerary to be like, oh, amazing! Like,
yes, you just cut 3 hours off of my final itinerary time. Thank 100%. You. And theirs is going to be better than anything I could have found on my own.
Yeah, the restaurant. I mean, restaurants are. I don't love a like static restaurant list, but tell me that you have been talking to concierges lately and like this chef left this restaurant, so like cross that off your list, or like give me some snippets that are like real actionable, like actual people, things that people who live there care about.
Yep.
Yeah. So like if you gave me a list that was like, here are my top 3 or 5 spots for a date night in this city. Here are my top 3 or 5 spots for a family needs to just like have something that's tasty, feels authentic and special, but doesn't need to be fancy. Like amazing.
Where are the parks? Like where can the kids go for 2 hours and just run around and get some energy out? Like,
or here are 5 restaurants that locals love. You're going to have to take a 20-minute taxi in the opposite direction of the Eiffel Tower. I promise when you get there, you're going to love it. There's not going to be a tourist in sight.
It's so worth it.
I want that list. I want it so bad. Yes. Oh my gosh. We are really setting up for the perfect DMC, guys. So DMCs,
I see that
if you're listening,
in your eye, and you can just like dampen it right now.
No, I could never start it. I have definitely thought about starting a DMC business. Trust me. I don't have destination knowledge and connections that would really be required. And also I really love being a travel advisor and getting to plan all over the world. So don't worry. There's a glint in the eye, but don't worry. But DMCs, if you're listening, I think we really welcome like the other side of this list. Like your responses to our utopic description. Also, what's the ideal travel advisor that you work with? Like if you could describe like this is the perfect profile of a travel advisor that we want to partner with, like I also like what does she wear and where does she shop?
also like what does her inquiry email brief look like? Tell me what's on that email from an ideal advisor perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, well, DMCs, you know where to find me. If you're interested to be a part of the conversation, we welcome it and we would love it. Kate and Anna, thank you so much. I really love this conversation so much. And if you have more DMC ideas, you also know where to find me. But thank you just for sharing and for diving into this, not just 1, but 2 episodes. I loved it. And I look forward to the next one.
Thanks, Whit. Thanks, Anna.
This was fun.